I met Jessica when we were both in college. She was the bright-eyed, adventurous type, always ready to take on new challenges. I was more of the laid-back, contemplative kind, but something about her zest for life drew me in. We started dating our sophomore year and got married right after graduation. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but we were happy, or so I thought. Fast forward 10 years, and we were living the quintessential suburban life. We had 2 kids, Emily and Ryan, a nice house with a white picket fence, and jobs that paid well enough to keep us comfortable. I worked as an engineer for a tech company, while Jessica was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. She was doing exceptionally well, recently promoted to a senior position. Life seemed perfect on the outside. But it was around that time that I started noticing changes. Jessica was working longer hours, often coming home late, claiming she had to meet tight deadlines. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her job was demanding, and I trusted her completely. But as weeks turned into months, her absences became more frequent. She seemed distant, preoccupied, even when she was home. There were missed family dinners, canceled weekend plans, and an increasing number of unexplained business trips. One evening, while Jessica was out working late again, I found myself scrolling through our old photos. I came across a picture from our honeymoon in Hawaii. We looked so happy, so in love. I couldn't help but wonder what had changed. Was it the stress of work, the responsibilities of raising a family? Or was it something else entirely? It wasn't until a random Saturday morning that I found the first clue. Jessica had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs getting ready. It buzzed with a notification. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen and saw a message from a name I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." My heart sank. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but I couldn't help myself. I opened the message thread and saw a string of intimate texts between Jessica and someone named Mark. Mark, as it turned out, was her boss. They had been having an affair for months, maybe longer. The texts left no room for doubt. They talked about their secret rendezvous, the excitement of sneaking around, and how they couldn't keep their hands off each other. I felt a mix of emotions: betrayal, anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. How could she do this to me? To our family? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I decided to gather more evidence. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to her behavior, checked her phone when she wasn't around, and even followed her once or twice. It was painful, but I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. One day, I followed her to a hotel downtown. I watched from a distance as she met Mark in the lobby. They didn't see me as they walked to the elevator, hand in hand, laughing and whispering to each other. I felt a pang of jealousy and rage, but I managed to keep my cool. I took a few pictures with my phone, proof that I would confront her with later. The next morning, while Jessica was in the shower, I checked her email. Sure enough, there were messages from Mark discussing their next business trip. I printed them out and put them in a folder, along with the photos I had taken. I felt sick to my stomach, but I knew I had to face her with the truth. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat Jessica down in the living room. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking, but I knew it was now or never. I took a deep breath and began, "Jessica, we need to talk." She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What is it, Tom?" "I know about you and Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "I've seen the messages, the emails. I followed you to the hotel." Jessica's eyes filled with tears and she started to sob. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, feeling a surge of anger. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back. How could you do this to me, to our kids?" "I don't know," she cried. "I was feeling so overwhelmed with work, and Mark was there. He understood me. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. I wanted to believe her, to forgive her, but the pain was too raw, too fresh. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "I need some time to think," I said, walking towards the door. "I don't know what to do right now." As I left the house, I heard her calling my name, but I couldn't turn back. I needed space, time to process everything. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying the events in my mind. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I had no idea what to do next. Driving around aimlessly that night, the betrayal sunk in deeper. I felt a storm of emotions, rage, sadness, and confusion. I couldn't just go back home and pretend everything was fine. I needed to confront Jessica, to hear her side, even if it would tear me apart. So I parked at a deserted lot by the beach, the waves crashing against the shore echoing the turmoil in my heart, and thought about my next steps. The next day, I decided to call in sick. I needed time to think and gather my wits before facing her again. I also wanted to see if there were more clues, more pieces to the puzzle of her betrayal. As Jessica left for work, I knew where she was really heading, and this time I was determined to catch her red-handed. I followed her discreetly, my heart pounding in my chest. Sure enough, she drove straight to the same hotel downtown. This time I was prepared. I had a small camera with me, and I was ready to document everything. I watched as she met Mark in the lobby, their eyes lighting up as they saw each other. They shared a quick kiss before heading upstairs. My blood boiled at the sight. I waited for a few minutes, giving them enough time to get comfortable, and then I made my move. I entered the hotel and took the elevator up to the floor I had seen them get off on. I didn't know which room they were in, but I figured I could find out. I walked down the hallway, listening for any sounds that might indicate which room they were in. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Then I heard it, soft laughter and murmured voices coming from behind one of the doors. I approached quietly and put my ear to the door. I could hear Jessica's voice, laughing at something Mark had said. My hands shook as I took out my phone and started recording. I couldn't see what was happening, but the sounds were enough to confirm my worst fears. I heard the bed creak, and then Jessica's voice again, this time softer, more intimate. "I've missed you," she said. "Last night was amazing." Mark's voice followed, a low, rumbling laugh. "I can't get enough of you, Jess. You're incredible." I felt sick to my stomach, but I kept recording. I needed proof, undeniable evidence of her betrayal. Then the unmistakable sounds of them having sex began to filter through the door. Jessica's moans, Mark's grunts. It was all too much. My vision blurred with tears of rage and heartbreak, but I forced myself to keep recording. After what felt like an eternity, the noises finally stopped. I quickly stepped away from the door, not wanting to be caught if they decided to leave the room. I took the elevator back down and walked out of the hotel, feeling numb. I had the evidence I needed, but at what cost? My marriage, my family, everything I held dear was crumbling around me. That evening, I waited for Jessica to come home. I had the folder with the printed emails, the photos, and now the recording on my phone. When she walked through the door looking tired but cheerful, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and detached. She looked at me, puzzled. "What is it, Tom?" I didn't say anything. Instead, I handed her the folder. She opened it, and her face went from confusion to shock to horror as she realized what it contained. "Tom, Don't," I interrupted. "Just don't. I heard everything. I recorded everything." She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. This is a betrayal of everything we built together." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Jessica. The woman I married would never do something like this. I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. I was feeling so lost, so overwhelmed. Mark was there, and it just happened. "That's not an excuse," I snapped. "You had a choice. You could have talked to me. We could have worked through it together. Instead, you chose to betray me, to betray our family." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm so, so sorry. I love you, Tom. I do. Please give me a chance to make it right." I looked at her. The woman I had loved for so many years, now a stranger before me. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but I knew I needed time to think. "I need space," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to figure out what to do next." She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "I promise." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I turned and walked out of the house, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I drove around again, not knowing where to go or what to do. I ended up at a bar, drowning my sorrows in whiskey and trying to numb the pain. The betrayal cut deep, and I didn't know how or if I could ever move past it. The next few days were a blur. Jessica tried to talk to me, to explain, but I wasn't ready to listen. I stayed at a friend's place, avoiding her calls and texts. I needed to process everything, to figure out if our marriage could be salvaged or if it was beyond repair. It was during this time that I began to think about revenge. The thought of getting back at her, making her feel the pain she had caused me, was tempting, but I knew it wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't heal the wound or erase the betrayal. It would only make things worse. I realized I needed to confront her, to hear her out, and then decide what to do. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way forward. With a heavy heart, I headed back home, ready to face the woman who had shattered my world. Returning home felt like stepping into a battlefield. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that pressed down on you, heavy and oppressive. Jessica was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, lost in thought. She jumped when I walked in, her eyes red and puffy from crying. It was obvious she hadn't slept much, and I imagined she had been replaying our last conversation over and over in her head, just as I had. "Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. "Yeah, we do." We sat down at the dining table, the same table where we had shared countless meals, laughed with our kids, and made plans for the future. Now it felt like a place of judgment, where the fate of our marriage would be decided. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice cold and detached. "From the beginning, no more lies, no more excuses." Jessica took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "It started about 6 months ago," she began. "Work was getting really stressful, and I was feeling overwhelmed. Mark was there, and he seemed to understand what I was going through. We started talking more, confiding in each other. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were involved." "Involved?" I echoed, my anger rising again. "You mean you were fucking him behind my back?" She flinched at my words but didn't deny it. "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible. "We started meeting after work, during lunch breaks. It wasn't just about the sex, though. It was the attention, the feeling of being wanted and understood. I know it was wrong, but at the time, it felt like an escape." "An escape from what?" I demanded. "From me? From our kids? From the life we built together?" "From everything," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I felt like I was losing myself, drowning in responsibilities and expectations. Mark made me feel alive again." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me, to our children?" "Of course I did," she sobbed. "Every single day I felt guilty. I hated myself for what I was doing, but I didn't know how to stop. It was like I was caught in a web, and every time I tried to break free, I got more entangled." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head vehemently. "No, it wasn't love. It was a distraction, a way to escape the pressures I was feeling. I never stopped loving you, Tom. I swear." I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal was too fresh, the wounds too deep. "How can I trust you again?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How do I know this won't happen again?" "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, desperation in her voice. "Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please, give me a chance to make things right." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, now a stranger who had torn my heart apart. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but part of me wanted to try, for the sake of our kids, for the life we had built together. "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice hollow. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." "Please, Tom," she begged, her eyes pleading. "Just give me a chance. I love you. I love our family." Don't let this mistake destroy everything we've built. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her feel the pain she had caused me, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only make things worse. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "We'll see," I said finally. "We'll take it one day at a time. But you need to understand that things will never be the same. You've broken something in me, in us, and I don't know if it can be fixed." She nodded, her face a mask of anguish. "I understand," she whispered, "and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." The next few weeks were a nightmare. Jessica quit her job, saying she needed to focus on repairing our marriage. We started seeing a therapist, both individually and together. It was painful, dredging up all the hurt and betrayal, but it was also cathartic. I began to understand her feelings of isolation and overwhelm, and she began to understand the depth of my pain. Despite our efforts, the tension between us was palpable. Every time I looked at her, I saw her with Mark, heard their laughter, their intimate whispers. It was a constant reminder of her betrayal, and it drove a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. One night, after another grueling therapy session, I found myself at the bar again, drowning my sorrows in whiskey. I was lost in thought when a familiar voice broke through the haze. "Tom." I looked up to see Mark standing there, a smug smile on his face. My blood boiled at the sight of him, the man who had destroyed my life. I stood up, fists clenched, ready to wipe that smile off his face. "Leave," I growled, my voice low and dangerous. Now," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "No need to get violent. I just wanted to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I snapped. "You ruined my marriage. Stay the hell away from me and my family." He shrugged, unfazed. "Jessica came to me. She was the one who wanted more. Maybe you should be asking yourself why." That was it. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw. He staggered back, shocked, but quickly regained his composure. We traded blows, the bar around us erupting into chaos. I didn't care. All I wanted was to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused me. Eventually, we were pulled apart by the bouncers and thrown out of the bar. My face was bruised and bleeding, but I felt a grim satisfaction. It wasn't enough to erase the betrayal, but it was a start. As I sat on the curb, trying to catch my breath, I realized that revenge wouldn't bring me peace. It might feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't heal the wounds or mend the broken trust. The only way forward was to face the pain head-on, to confront the issues in our marriage, and decide whether we could rebuild from the ashes. The confrontation with Jessica had been brutal, but it was only the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and heartache. But for the sake of our family, for the love we once shared, I knew I had to try. And so, with a heavy heart and a bruised soul, I prepared to face the next chapter of our shattered lives, unsure of what the future would hold. The fight with Mark had left me physically sore, but the emotional wounds ran far deeper. Seeing him smirk at me, so unapologetic, only fueled my anger. Jessica's betrayal was one thing, but the smugness of her lover was like salt in the wound. While I knew violence wasn't the answer, the satisfaction I felt from landing a punch on him was undeniable. As the days passed, I struggled to find a way to cope with the rage and heartbreak. Jessica was doing her best to make amends, quitting her job, attending therapy, and trying to be more present at home. But every time I looked at her, the images of her and Mark together flashed in my mind. I couldn't escape the torment. One evening, as I sat in the darkened living room, nursing a drink, an idea began to form. It was risky and could backfire spectacularly, but the thought of seeing Mark suffer, even just a little, was too tempting to resist. I knew he was married, though I hadn't met his wife, Laura. From what Jessica had told me in passing, Laura was a stay-at-home mom with 2 young children. She probably had no idea what her husband was up to. I decided to contact Laura. It felt vindictive, but I needed her to know the truth. She deserved to know what kind of man she was married to, just as I had discovered the true nature of my own wife. I found her contact information online and drafted a carefully worded email, explaining everything in detail and attaching some of the evidence I had collected. Before I hit send, I hesitated. Was this the right thing to do? Would it help me heal or just drag another innocent person into the mess? In the end, my anger won out. I pressed send, feeling a mixture of guilt and satisfaction. Now, all I could do was wait and see what happened. A few days later, I received a reply from Laura. She was devastated and thanked me for telling her the truth. She asked if we could meet in person to discuss things further. I agreed, and we arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop out of town. When I walked into the coffee shop, I immediately recognized Laura from the photos I had seen online. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. I felt a pang of guilt for being the bearer of such terrible news, but I reminded myself that she deserved to know the truth. "Tom?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Yes," I replied, sitting down across from her. "I'm so sorry to meet you under these circumstances." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down." "I know the feeling," I said, my voice somber. "I thought I knew Jessica. I thought we had a strong marriage. But this has shattered everything." Laura wiped her eyes with a tissue. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "We're trying therapy, but it's hard. Every time I look at her, I see them together. I don't know if I can ever forgive her." "Same here," Laura said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to move forward from this." We talked for a while longer, sharing our pain and confusion. It was strange, but I felt a sense of solidarity with her. We were both victims of our spouse's betrayal, and talking to someone who truly understood was oddly comforting. As we were about to leave, Laura said, "I want to confront him. I want him to know that I know." "I understand," I replied. "Just be careful. People can be unpredictable when they're cornered." "I will," she promised. "Thank you again, Tom, for everything." Driving home, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to have shared the burden with someone else, but another part felt guilty for involving Laura. Still, it was done, and there was no turning back now. That evening, Jessica could tell something was different. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." She didn't press further, sensing that I wasn't ready to talk. But inside, I was bracing myself for the fallout from my actions. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Tom?" a woman's voice said. "This is Laura." "Laura, what's going on?" I asked, my heart racing. "I confronted Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "It was horrible. He denied everything at first, but when I showed him the emails and texts, he couldn't lie anymore. He begged for forgiveness, but I told him I needed time to think." "I'm so sorry, Laura," I said, feeling a surge of empathy. "I know how hard this must be for you." "Thank you," she replied. "But there's more. Mark wants to meet with you. He said he needs to apologize in person." I was taken aback. "He wants to meet me? Why?" "I don't know," Laura said. "Maybe he thinks it will make things right. Or maybe he's just trying to save his own skin. But he insisted on it." I didn't know how to respond. The thought of facing Mark again, of hearing his excuses and apologies, was almost too much to bear. But part of me was curious, even morbidly so. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll meet him. When and where?" Laura gave me the details, and we agreed to meet the following evening at a small, discreet restaurant. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. What was Mark hoping to achieve? Did he really think an apology could fix the damage he had caused? When I arrived at the restaurant, Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked different, haggard, stressed. As I approached, he stood up, extending a hand. I ignored it and sat down, glaring at him. "Tom," he began, his voice strained. "Thank you for meeting me." "Get to the point," I said curtly. "What do you want?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. I know I've caused you a lot of pain, and I'm truly sorry." "Sorry?" I scoffed. "You're sorry. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed my marriage, my family." "I know," he said, his eyes filled with remorse. "And I hate myself for it. But it wasn't just me. Jessica. She was part of this too." "I know that," I snapped. "But that doesn't absolve you of your responsibility." "I understand," he said quietly. "I just wanted to face you, man to man, and tell you that I regret everything. I made a huge mistake, and I don't expect you to forgive me. but I needed to say it. I stared at him, my anger simmering just below the surface. Part of me wanted to punch him again, to make him feel the physical pain he had inflicted on me emotionally. But another part of me realized that this was just a broken man, grappling with the consequences of his actions. "Your apology doesn't change anything," I said finally. "It doesn't fix the damage you've done." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I had to try. For my own sanity." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared misery hanging in the air. Finally, I stood up. "I hope you learn from this," I said. "Because if you ever come near my family again, I won't be so forgiving." Mark nodded, his eyes downcast. "I understand. And I promise you'll never have to see me again." I walked out of the restaurant, feeling a strange sense of closure. It wasn't forgiveness, not by a long shot, but it was a step towards healing. Mark had shown remorse, and while it didn't erase the pain, it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could all move forward from this mess. When I got home, Jessica was waiting for me. She looked anxious, clearly sensing that something significant had happened. "How did it go?" she asked cautiously. I sighed, sitting down next to her. "He apologized," I said simply. "And?" she prompted. "And nothing," I replied. "It doesn't change anything. But at least he knows the extent of the damage he's caused." Jessica nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Tom, for everything." "I know you are," I said softly. "But we have a long way to go if we're going to fix this, and I'm not sure if we can." "We will," she whispered, taking my hand. "I promise, we will." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with pain and challenges, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild our shattered lives. In the aftermath of my confrontation with Mark, life became a series of highs and lows, each day a struggle between hope and despair. The pain of betrayal lingered, a shadow over every moment. Even as Jessica and I worked to repair our marriage, the trust that had been shattered felt almost impossible to restore. Jessica threw herself into therapy, both individual and couples sessions. She was determined to make things right, to prove that she was committed to our family. I could see the effort she was putting in, and part of me wanted to believe that we could move past this. But every time I looked at her, the memories of her affair with Mark resurfaced, a constant reminder of her betrayal. Our therapist, Dr. Collins, was patient and understanding. She helped us navigate the turbulent emotions, encouraging us to be honest and open with each other. Jessica talked about the pressures she had felt at work, the loneliness she experienced even when surrounded by people, and how Mark had seemed like a lifeline in a sea of stress. "I felt invisible," Jessica admitted during one session. "Like no one really saw me or understood what I was going through. Mark was there and he made me feel important, appreciated." "Why didn't you talk to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling?" "I didn't want to burden you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You had your own stresses, your own responsibilities. I didn't want to add to that." "But we're supposed to be partners," I argued. "We're supposed to support each other. Instead, you turned to someone else." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." Dr. Collins guided us through these painful conversations, helping us to understand each other's perspectives. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to walk away, to give up on the possibility of reconciliation. But for the sake of our children, for the life we had built together, I kept trying. The emotional impact of the affair was profound. I struggled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if I had somehow failed Jessica, if I had pushed her into Mark's arms. I knew logically that her choices were her own, but the doubts gnawed at me, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. Jessica, on the other hand, was grappling with guilt and remorse. She hated herself for what she had done, for the pain she had caused. I could see the toll it was taking on her, and while part of me wanted to comfort her, another part resented her for making herself the victim. The kids sensed that something was wrong, though we tried to shield them from the worst of it. Emily, our oldest, was particularly perceptive. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with wide, worried eyes. "Daddy, why are you and Mommy so sad?" she asked. I forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're just dealing with some grown-up problems, sweetheart. But we love you and Ryan very much, and we're going to be okay." "Promise?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Promise," I said, my heart breaking. I wanted so desperately to believe it, for her sake. Despite the tension at home, I found solace in small moments. Playing with the kids, going for runs, losing myself in work. These activities provided a brief escape from the turmoil. But the nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, the silence amplified my thoughts, my fears, my doubts. Jessica often cried herself to sleep, her guilt and remorse manifesting in tearful apologies whispered in the dark. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of anger and sadness, wanting to comfort her but also needing to protect my own heart. One particularly difficult night, after a grueling therapy session, I found myself sitting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. Jessica came downstairs, her eyes red and puffy. She sat next to me, her presence both comforting and painful. "Tom," she said softly, "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm committed to making things right. I love you, and I will do whatever it takes to prove that." I looked at her, the woman I had shared my life with, the mother of my children. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desperation to make amends. But the wound was still raw, and the path to forgiveness seemed impossibly steep. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try. For our kids, for us." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "That's all I can ask for. Thank you." As the weeks turned into months, we continued to navigate the rocky terrain of our relationship. There were good days, where we felt like we were making progress, and bad days, where the pain and resentment threatened to overwhelm us. But through it all, we kept trying, kept pushing forward. One evening, Jessica suggested we take a weekend trip, just the two of us, to try and reconnect. I was hesitant at first, unsure if being alone together would help or hurt. But I agreed, hoping that a change of scenery might provide some clarity. We went to a small cabin in the mountains, a place we had visited years ago, before the kids were born. The familiar surroundings brought back memories of happier times, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. We spent the weekend hiking, talking, and just being together. There were moments of awkwardness, of course, but there were also moments of genuine connection. Sitting by the fire one night, Jessica took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Tom, I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I'm so sorry," she said. "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please, give me a chance." I squeezed her hand, feeling a mix of emotions. "I love you too, Jessica, and I'm trying, but it's going to take time." "I know," she said, her voice filled with determination, "and I'm willing to wait, as long as it takes." As we sat there, the fire crackling in the hearth, I felt a small flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. The road to healing was long and uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like we might actually make it through. Returning home, we faced the same challenges and struggles, but there was a renewed sense of purpose. We were both committed to making things work, to rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain seemed too much to bear. But we kept going, kept trying, for ourselves, for our children, for the life we had once dreamed of. The emotional impact of the affair would never fully disappear, but with time it began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. We had a long way to go, but we were moving forward one step at a time, together. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. As the months rolled on, Jessica and I continued to work on our marriage. There were moments of progress and moments of setback, but the effort was always there. Yet, despite the therapy sessions and our attempts at reconnecting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. The trust was still fragile, and the wounds still fresh. Every so often, I caught myself wondering if this was a battle we were destined to lose. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Jessica and I sat down for what would become our most honest and heart-wrenching conversation. I had felt it building up for days, an unspoken tension that neither of us could ignore. We both knew that this was a crucial moment, one that would determine the future of our relationship. "Tom," Jessica began, her voice trembling slightly, "I know we've been working hard, and I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't help but feel like there's still a wall between us. I don't know how to break it down." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I feel the same way. We've made progress, but it seems like no matter what we do, that trust isn't coming back. I want to forgive you, Jessica. I really do. But every time I look at you, I see you with him. I hear the lies, and it tears me apart." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and it's my fault. I've been trying so hard to make it right, but maybe it's just not enough. Maybe I've done too much damage." Silence hung heavy between us. I could hear the faint sounds of the kids' lullaby music from upstairs, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. "Do you still love me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for so long. "Yes," she whispered. "I love you more than anything. That's why this is so painful. Knowing that I hurt the person I love most in the world is unbearable." "I love you too," I said, my voice breaking. "But love alone isn't enough. We need trust, and I'm not sure if we can ever get that back." "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe we need to figure out who we are as individuals before we can figure out who we are together." Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think you're right. We've been so focused on trying to fix us that we've lost sight of ourselves." "I think we need to separate," I said, the words feeling like a knife in my chest. "Not permanently, but for a while. We need to give each other space to heal." Jessica sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I don't want to lose you, Tom. But if this is what we need to do, then I'll do it." "It's not about losing each other," I said gently, taking her hands in mine. "It's about finding ourselves again. We can't rebuild a broken foundation. We need to start fresh." We sat there, holding hands and crying, the weight of our decision sinking in. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. But deep down, I knew it was the right choice. The next morning, we explained our decision to the kids as best as we could. Emily and Ryan were confused and upset, but we reassured them that we both loved them very much and that this was something we needed to do to make our family stronger. Jessica found a small apartment nearby, and we agreed to share custody of the kids, alternating weeks. The first few weeks were excruciating. The house felt empty without Jessica's presence, and the silence was deafening. I missed her, missed the routine of our life together, but I knew this was necessary. During our time apart, I focused on my own healing. I continued therapy, delving deeper into my own issues and insecurities. I spent more time with friends, reestablishing connections that had been neglected. I found solace in hobbies I had forgotten, rediscovering passions that had been overshadowed by the pain. Jessica was doing the same. She threw herself into therapy and self-improvement, trying to understand her own motivations and actions. She reached out to old friends, mending relationships that had been strained by her affair. We communicated regularly about the kids, but our conversations were cautious, careful not to tread into emotional territory. One evening, a few months into our separation, Jessica called me. Her voice was calm but determined. "Tom, can we meet? I think we need to have another conversation." We agreed to meet at a small park where we used to take the kids. It was a neutral place, filled with memories of happier times. As I approached, I saw her sitting on a bench, looking out at the playground where children were laughing and playing. "Hi," I said, sitting down next to her. "Hi," she replied, turning to face me. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I said. "What did you want to talk about?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about everything that happened. And I've come to realize that as much as I want to make things right, I can't force it. We both need to want it, and we both need to be ready." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I know, and I want to, Jessica. But I'm still not sure if I'm ready." "That's okay," she said softly. "I think this time apart has been good for us. It's given us both a chance to reflect and heal. But maybe we need more time. Maybe we need to continue this separation for a while longer." "I agree," I said. relieved that she understood. I think we're making progress, but we need to be patient. We need to give ourselves the space to grow individually before we can come back together. Jessica smiled, a sad but hopeful smile. I love you, Tom, and I believe that we can get through this, but we need to do it the right way. I love you too, I said, taking her hand. And I believe in us. No matter what happens, we'll always be a family. We sat there in silence, holding hands and watching the children play. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with uncertainty, but also with a glimmer of hope. We had a long road ahead of us, but we were committed to walking it, one step at a time. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. We stood up, hugged each other tightly, and then went our separate ways, ready to face whatever the future held. The weeks following our last conversation were a mix of relief and sadness. Jessica and I had made the difficult decision to continue our separation, giving each other the space we needed to heal and grow individually. It was a necessary step, but that didn't make it any easier. The house felt emptier without her, and I missed the familiar rhythm of our life together. Emily and Ryan adjusted to the new routine better than I had expected. Kids are resilient, and while they missed having both of us under the same roof, they seemed to enjoy the special one-on-one time with each of us. We made sure to keep their lives as stable as possible, maintaining the same school routines, extracurricular activities, and family traditions. During this period, Jessica and I focused on rebuilding ourselves. I delved deeper into my therapy sessions, confronting the underlying issues that had surfaced after her affair. I realized that I had neglected my own needs and emotions for too long, burying them under work and responsibilities. Therapy helped me rediscover my own identity, separate from my role as a husband and father. Jessica was on a similar journey. She was working on understanding her own motivations and the choices she had made. She enrolled in a few personal development courses, focusing on mindfulness and emotional intelligence. It was clear that she was committed to becoming a better person, not just for me and the kids, but for herself as well. Our communication during this time was mostly about the kids and logistics, but every now and then, we had deeper conversations. We talked about our personal growth, our fears, and our hopes for the future. These conversations were cautious, but they showed that we were both committed to healing, individually and together. One evening, about 6 months into our separation, Jessica called me. There was a new calmness in her voice, a sense of clarity that hadn't been there before. "Tom, I think it's time for us to talk about the future," she said. We agreed to meet at our favorite cafe, a place that held many fond memories for us. As I walked in, I saw Jessica sitting at a corner table, looking both nervous and hopeful. I took a deep breath and joined her, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Hi, Jess," I said, smiling warmly. "Hi, Tom," she replied, her eyes bright. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," I said, sitting down. "What did you want to talk about?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady. "And I realize that while I've made a lot of progress, there's still more work to do. But I don't want to do it alone anymore. I want us to start rebuilding our relationship if you're ready." I felt a surge of emotions, relief, hope, fear, but mostly love. "I've been thinking the same thing," I said. "I think we've both grown a lot during this time apart, and I believe we can start moving forward together." Jessica smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know it won't be easy, and we still have a lot of work to do. But I'm committed to making this work, Tom. For us. For our family." "Me too," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I love you, Jessica, and I believe in us." We talked for hours, laying out a plan to slowly reintegrate our lives. We decided to start by spending more time together as a family, having regular date nights, and continuing our therapy sessions. We knew it wouldn't be a quick fix, but we were both committed to the journey. The first few weeks were a mix of awkwardness and excitement. We took things slowly, rediscovering each other, and rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. We went on dates, just the two of us, and enjoyed family outings with the kids. Each step forward was a small victory, a sign that we were on the right path. One weekend, we decided to take a family trip to the mountains, the same place where Jessica and I had gone during our initial separation. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to create new memories and solidify our commitment to each other. As we hiked through the trails, Emily and Ryan running ahead, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. Jessica walked beside me, her hand in mine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about our future. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, I realized how far we had come. The pain of the past was still there, but it was no longer a constant shadow. We had faced it, confronted it, and were slowly healing. Jessica turned to me, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Tom, thank you for giving us a second chance," she said softly. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm so grateful for your forgiveness and love." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for fighting for us, Jess. We've been through hell, but we've come out stronger. I love you, and I believe in our future." We kissed, a tender, heartfelt moment that felt like a new beginning. The kids giggled and teased us, but their laughter was a sweet reminder of what we were fighting for, a family built on love, resilience, and forgiveness. As the months turned into a year, Jessica and I continued to rebuild our relationship. There were still challenges, moments of doubt and fear, but the love and commitment we shared kept us moving forward. We celebrated each milestone, each victory, no matter how small, as a testament to our journey. One evening, about a year after we had decided to start rebuilding, Jessica and I sat down to dinner after putting the kids to bed. There was a sense of normalcy, a routine that felt comforting and right. "Tom," Jessica said, looking across the table at me, "I know we've come a long way, and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for believing in us, for giving us another chance." I smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "Thank you, Jess, for fighting for us, for being patient and understanding. I love you more than ever." We sat there, holding hands and smiling at each other. The weight of the past lifted just a little bit more. We had faced our darkest moments and come out stronger, ready to face whatever the future held. As we cleared the table and got ready for bed, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our journey was far from over, but we were walking it together, hand in hand. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. In the end, the affair had tested us in ways we never could have imagined. It had broken us down, but it had also forced us to confront our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, and ultimately, our strength. We had emerged from the storm, battered but not beaten, ready to build a new future together. As we lay in bed that night, Jessica snuggled up next to me. I felt a sense of peace and gratitude. Our love had been tested and tempered, and it had survived. We had survived, and that was the greatest victory of all. The passage of time has a way of soothing even the deepest wounds. In the years following our decision to rebuild our marriage, Jessica and I found ourselves slowly but surely falling into a new rhythm, one marked by understanding, patience, and an unwavering commitment to each other and our family. The initial stages of our reconciliation were filled with tentative steps. We moved back in together, gradually merging our lives once more. The kids, who had been our anchor through the storm, seemed to sense the positive shift and flourished in the renewed stability. Family outings became more frequent, and our home filled with laughter and joy that had been absent for too long. Jessica and I continued our therapy sessions, recognizing that maintaining our progress required ongoing effort. We learned to communicate more openly and honestly, addressing issues as they arose rather than allowing them to fester. The transparency we developed became a cornerstone of our renewed relationship. As the years passed, we celebrated milestones that once seemed impossible to reach. Our 15th wedding anniversary was a particularly poignant occasion. We hosted a small gathering of close friends and family who had supported us through our darkest times. There were tears, toasts, and heartfelt speeches. But most importantly, there was a sense of triumph. We had made it. Professionally, both Jessica and I found new paths. Jessica, having left her previous job, took on a role at a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting families in crisis. Her own experiences had given her a unique perspective and a deep empathy for those going through similar struggles. She found fulfillment in her work, helping others navigate the rocky terrains of their relationships. I continued my career as an engineer, but took on new projects that allowed me to travel and expand my horizons. Each return home was a reminder of what mattered most, and the time apart made our moments together even more precious. The balance between our professional and personal lives brought a newfound stability and satisfaction. One of the most significant changes in our lives was our approach to parenting. The ordeal had taught us the importance of being present and engaged. We made a conscious effort to spend quality time with Emily and Ryan, ensuring they felt secure and loved. Family game nights, weekend camping trips, and shared hobbies became integral parts of our routine. Emily blossomed into a confident and compassionate young woman, excelling in school and pursuing her passion for the arts. Ryan, always the curious and energetic one, developed a love for science and sports. Watching them grow and thrive was a constant source of pride and joy. Our relationship with Laura, Mark's wife, took an unexpected turn as well. After our initial meeting, Laura and I had stayed in touch sporadically, offering each other support and understanding. She eventually divorced Mark and rebuilt her own life, finding happiness and strength in her newfound independence. Our occasional updates became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As for Mark, he faded from our lives, a painful chapter that we chose to close. Forgiveness, while difficult, was an essential part of our healing process. Holding on to anger and resentment would have only hindered our progress. Instead, we focused on moving forward, learning from the past, but not allowing it to define us. Looking back, the affair that once threatened to destroy everything we held dear had become a turning point, a catalyst for profound change and growth. It forced us to confront our vulnerabilities, to reassess our priorities, and to build a stronger, more resilient foundation for our marriage. One evening, as Jessica and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset and sipping wine, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been if it hadn't happened?" she asked. I considered her question carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I also think that we wouldn't be the people we are today without having gone through it. It was hell, but it made us stronger. It taught us to appreciate what we have and to fight for it." Jessica nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I agree. I'm so grateful for the second chance we've had, for the love we've rediscovered." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We've come a long way, Jess, and I'm proud of us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over our home, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had brought us to a place of understanding and love that we might never have reached otherwise. In the years that followed, we continued to build on the foundation we had laid. Our children grew up, and we watched with pride as they ventured into the world, armed with the values and lessons we had instilled in them. Emily went on to study art and design, while Ryan pursued a career in engineering, following in my footsteps. Jessica and I entered a new phase of our lives, becoming empty nesters but finding joy in each other's company. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and deepened our bond. The scars of the past were still there, but they were reminders of our resilience, of the strength we had found within ourselves and each other. We also became more involved in our community, volunteering our time and resources to support families facing similar challenges. Our story, once a source of pain, became a beacon of hope for others. We shared our experiences openly, hoping to inspire others to fight for their relationships and to believe in the possibility of healing and renewal. As we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by friends, family, and our now-grown children, I reflected on the incredible journey we'd undertaken. The road had been far from easy, but it had led us to a place of profound love and understanding. In my toast that evening, I looked at Jessica, my heart full. "To my wife, my partner, and my best friend," I began. "We've faced unimaginable challenges, but we've also experienced incredible joy. Our love has been tested, but it has also been strengthened. Here's to many more years of laughter, love, and shared dreams." Jessica smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And here's to you, Tom, for your unwavering support, your forgiveness, and your love. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in this journey." We clinked glasses, surrounded by applause and cheers, but the real celebration was in our hearts. We had endured the storm and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the future held, together. As the evening drew to a close and we danced under the stars, I whispered in Jessica's ear, "I love you, Jess. Always have, always will." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "I love you too, Tom. More than words can express." In that moment, I knew that we had truly found our way back to each other. The past was a part of our story, but it no longer defined us. Our new life was built on a foundation of love, trust, and unwavering commitment, and it was a life we cherished every single day. And so, our story continued, not defined by the pain of the past, but by the strength and love that had carried us through. It was a new life, a life we had fought for, and one that we would continue to nurture and celebrate for all the years to come.